Hi, Charlie. In this video, I have a new writing piece for you called The Goswin Relic Code. I hope you enjoy it. The midday city buzz streamed into Anne's study through the large bay window. Hours had flown by since Anne sat at her desk and set herself the task of solving the mystery of her uncle's travel journals. Her uncle had passed away only a week and a half ago. His notes and logs had been handed over to Anne shortly afterward, along with some field equipment and a message. In the message, Anne's uncle said he was leaving his expedition gear and logs to her because she was the only person he trusted to pursue finding the lost relic of Goswin. He had spent his life devoted to searching for the relic. It was important to him that someone would carry on the task. Something about receiving this message alleviated some of the sadness Anne felt about his passing, but it was a formidable endeavor he had left to her. Legend told that many had died on the quest for the relic of Goswin. Others had wasted their lives in vain pursuit of the relic to bring them fame and glory. Anne had always been curious about her uncle's mysterious search. She didn't think he was after fame, and he hadn't died on his quest. It seemed to Anne that his interest came from some other motivation, like a quest for knowledge. Anne pushed herself away from the desk where she sat and stretched her arms. She had been sitting bent over her uncle's notes for so long that her body was stiff and her joints cracked as she stood up. She yawned and picked up the watering can. She went to the window and poured a little water into the plant pots lined up on the bench. Outside, people were gathered at the bakery cafe across the street from Anne's loft. Thinking about the soups and sandwiches and desserts made her stomach rumble. "I better get something to eat," she said to herself. She crossed the study, picking up one of her uncle's papers on her way. It was some kind of code. The symbols were unfamiliar to her, but she could see that her uncle had attempted to translate them into an old academic language used by scholars centuries ago. It was called Ursophic, and Anne knew how to read it after studying it at the university. Nevertheless, it wasn't clear to her how her uncle had matched it to the symbols on the paper. "You're going to run into things with your head buried in those papers," said Tildy, Anne's housekeeper. Tildy was sitting at the wooden table in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. "I won't feel bad for you if you hurt yourself, but I don't want to have to explain to your mother if you break one of her urns." "Tildy, I could walk this house with my eyes shut," said Anne, without looking up from her paper. "Mother was so anxious that I would break something when I was a kid that I made a mental map of the place. Is there anything to eat?" "Over there, honey." Tildy pointed at a plate of cut-up apples, cheese, and bread. Anne sat at the table and buttered a slice of bread. She added a piece of yellow cheese on top and munched on it while still engrossed by the code on the paper. "If your uncle were still alive, I'd throttle him," said Tildy, mostly to herself. "You have better things to do than busy yourself with this relic fantasy. Such a waste, you sitting here all day. It's the summer, Moonberry Festival, and you haven't even flown a serpent string, or bought a gown, or even had a single bit of my Libelian cream cake." "Yes, that's it," said Anne. "The Moonberry Festival. Tildy, what did you say it used to be called before The Lisbellian unification? It was Mstravel Day, and Mstravel means moonberry. It means moonberry in Old Ursophic, right? Well, yes, but it's not the actual berries. The plant was named after the yellow color of the moon in midsummer because the berries look just like it. It means summer moon. Thanks, Tildy. Tildy rolled her eyes and picked up another potato to peel as Anne hurried back to her study. Tildy had given her a clue. One of the symbols pointed to the Ursophic word Mstravel. The symbol was a circular shape, but the right half was dark. It was exactly like a half moon that was waning after the moon had been full. The symbols appeared to represent natural shapes and features. Anne began to solve the puzzle of how her uncle had mapped the Ursophic words to them. 3 symbols were still unidentified, but Anne had enough information to read some of the coded text in her uncle's papers. Decoding the text was long and tedious. Night had fallen, and no amount of coaxing from Tildy could get Anne to come downstairs for supper. Finally, Tildy gave up and lit the oil lamps in Anne's study before mumbling her disapproval and a gruff goodnight. The coded text definitely pointed to a destination, but it also gave a time frame for the journey. It seemed that whatever lay ahead of the journey would only be accessible in a specific season or on a specific day. Anne wasn't quite sure. The missing translation of the codes were holding up her progress. Realizing she'd done as much as she could, she set her work aside and went to bed. Morning arrived faster than Anne would have liked. Tildy pushed the curtains open in Anne's room, taking some pleasure in hearing Anne groan herself awake. With considerable yawning, Anne got dressed and grabbed the notes from her study. "I'm going out, Tildy," said Anne as she passed through the kitchen to the staircase leading to the main house. "At blessed last," said Tildy. The big house was quiet and empty. Anne hated it like this. That was why she stayed upstairs in the loft. She paced the length of the building to the front door as quickly as possible. The city bustle was only just beginning, and Anne took advantage of the nearly empty streets. She half walked and half ran across town to the university in the East District. She reached the library doors just as they were opened by old Professor Bialdi. He stumbled backward as Anne breezed past him. "Hi, Professor Bialdi," she said. "Please don't run in the library, Anne," he said, smacking his palm to his forehead. Anne slowed her pace until she was out of earshot of the professor and sprinted up the stairs to the 5th floor, linguistics and history. She found an empty table with good light coming in through the stained-glass windows and set down her things. Next, she proceeded to search for the volumes she thought might help her finish decoding her uncle's notes. She pulled out an Ursophic to Lisbellian translation dictionary and a history of pre-Lisbel cultures and civilizations. The 3 remaining symbols looked to Anne like a squiggle octopus, some kind of square lattice, and a shaggy mouse. She read the history carefully and translated much of it into Ursophic to understand it in more of its original meaning and context. Eventually, the shaggy mouse was revealed to be an ancient mythological being associated with the northern mountain region. The squiggle octopus was vibrating serpent grass that was a featured part of the Moonberry Festival. Finally, the square lattice figure decoded to rock or crystal. Anne leaned back in her chair. She had done it. The decoded symbols depicted a journey, one which must take place between the full and half waning moon around the summer solstice. Her destination was northeast. She would follow the route of the traders, up the Windsong River, to its source, deep in the heart of the Crystal Forest.